"This is a restricted military zone, ma'am, not a tourist lookout." An officer's voice was sharp. The woman simply nodded, but when she turned her head, a glint of ink on her neck caught the general's eye. He froze. The air at the Fort Bragg training range shimmered, a visible curtain of heat rising from the scorched earth. The percussive crack of sniper rifles echoed across the sprawling grounds, a sound that made most civilians flinch. But the woman standing alone near the perimeter fence remained perfectly still. Her name was Maya. At 40, streaks of silver threaded through her shoulder-length brown hair, pulled back loosely. Fine lines fanned from the corners of her eyes that were a placid, unassuming shade of blue, currently fixed on the training field below. She wore simple jeans and a plain gray t-shirt, an outfit that made her blend into the background like a faded photograph. She was here for her younger brother, Leo, and his first Delta Force sniper qualification. Her quiet presence did not go unnoticed. A pair of recruits, barely out of their teens, eyed her from a distance. "Probably a bored suburban mom who got the wrong directions," one whispered, just loud enough to carry on the dry wind. The other snickered. "Or one of those groupies. Thinks she's gonna land a real-life action hero." A young lieutenant, his jaw set with the rigid importance of his new authority, strode over to her. "Ma'am," he said, his tone polite but firm. "This area is off-limits to unauthorized personnel. You need to be behind the visitor's barrier." Maya gave a slow nod, her gaze not leaving the field. "I understand. I'll move." She retreated to the designated area, a flimsy rope barrier that felt more symbolic than functional. She clasped her hands in front of her, her posture one of serene patience. Down on the range, she could see Leo. His hands trembled as he struggled to adjust the bipod on a massive M200 intervention rifle. He was swimming in the gear, his movements jerky with nerves. The master sergeant overseeing the test barked an order, and Leo fumbled, dropping a magazine into the dust. His shoulders slumped in defeat. The lieutenant approached her again. "Ma'am, with all due respect, your presence is a distraction. Your brother needs to focus." "I haven't said a word," Maya replied, her voice soft, almost a murmur. "He keeps looking over here," the officer insisted. Just then, Leo glanced up, his eyes locking with hers across the 100 yards of sun-baked dirt. It was a look of pure, desperate panic, the same look he'd had at 10 years old when he fell from the tallest branch of the oak tree in their backyard. It was a silent plea that screamed, "Don't leave me." Maya's jaw tightened. She would not leave. The master sergeant, a barrel-chested man with a face like tanned leather, finally had enough. He stomped over to the barrier, his boots kicking up clouds of red dust. "All right, lady, that's it. I don't know who you are, but this isn't a family picnic. You're out. Now." "Sergeant, I'm just. You're a distraction to my trainee," he cut her off, pointing a thick finger toward Leo, who was now sweating profusely under the Carolina sun. "This is Delta Force selection. We don't have time for emotional support visits. Leave the premises." The recruits who had mocked her earlier were now watching with smug satisfaction. This was the inevitable conclusion, the civilian being put in her place by the hardened professional. Maya opened her mouth to protest, but a sudden clatter from the firing line stole everyone's attention. A different trainee, startled by the sergeant's shouting, had mishandled his weapon. The multi-$1,000 M200 rifle, heavy and awkward in his inexperienced hands, tipped off its rest and crashed onto the concrete slab. A collective gasp went through the trainees. The master sergeant spun around, his face turning a shade of purple. Before anyone could react, Maya moved. It wasn't a conscious decision, it was pure, honed instinct. She ducked under the rope barrier in one fluid motion, closing the distance to the fallen rifle in 3 long strides. She knelt, her hands finding their place on the weapon with an impossible familiarity. "You're fighting it," she said, her voice low and calm, directed at the stunned trainee. She adjusted the rifle's position. "Let the frame do the work. Your bones, not your muscles. As she spoke, she effortlessly flicked the bipod legs back into position and settled the weapon with a soft, solid thud. Center your gravity. Breathe out. The young man stared, speechless. In that moment, as Maya turned her head slightly to look him in the eye, she pushed a stray strand of hair behind her ear. The movement exposed the skin on the right side of her neck, just below her hairline. There, etched in faded black ink, was a tattoo, a spiraling, vortex-like wave, and nestled within its curve were the characters E29V. At that exact moment, General Marcus Thorne, a 3-star general in charge of Joint Special Operations Command, was conducting a routine inspection of the training facilities. He was walking just behind the firing line, his aide trailing him. His gaze swept idly over the scene, the angry sergeant, the clumsy trainee, the civilian woman who shouldn't have been there. And then his eyes landed on her neck. The general stopped dead in his tracks. It was as if he had walked into a wall of glass. The air left his lungs in a sharp hiss. His aide, mid-sentence, fell silent, seeing the general's face drain of all color. He was frozen, his eyes locked on that small patch of ink as if he were staring at a ghost. A heavy silence descended upon the firing line. The oppressive heat, the distant hum of machinery, the very air seemed to hold its breath. General Thorne took a single, deliberate step forward, his voice a raw, disbelieving whisper that somehow cut through the stillness. E29V. He breathed, the code leaving his lips like a prayer from a forgotten religion. He took another step, his eyes never leaving Maya. The ghost of Operation Silent Vortex. The master sergeant, who had been about to reprimand Maya for crossing the barrier, froze with his mouth agape. The recruit's smirks had evaporated, replaced by wide-eyed confusion. Leo stared from his position, his world tilting on its axis. He knew his sister, the quiet librarian who made him soup when he was sick. He did not know this woman. General Thorne came to a stop a few feet from Maya, his posture shifting from one of command to one of profound, unmistakable reverence. "It's you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My God, you're real. We all thought you were a myth, a file name." "I'm real, General," Maya said softly, straightening up. Thorne's eyes swept over the bewildered faces of the soldiers around them. A fire ignited in his gaze, the fire of a story that had been buried for over a decade, demanding to be told. He turned to the crowd, his voice booming with an authority that rattled their bones. "Listen up," he commanded. "All of you. This woman you see before you, this civilian distraction, she is the reason I am alive today. She's the reason 6 Delta operators made it home to their families from a mission command had already written off as a complete loss." He paced slowly, his eyes locking with every soldier's. The year was 2012. We were deep in the Hindu Kush mountains of Afghanistan. A recon mission. Intel told us the valley was clear. Intel was wrong. We walked straight into a kill box. Ambushed, pinned down, surrounded on all sides from elevated positions. For 8 hours, we fought for every inch of rock. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. A blizzard rolled in. Zero visibility. Radio was dead, air support was impossible. We were out of ammo, out of time, and out of hope. We were preparing for our last stand. The general stopped and pointed directly at Maya. And then, from the heavens, came salvation. One by one, the enemy positions went silent. Not with the roar of a bomb, but with the whisper of a ghost. 7 shots. From a position our satellite said was unreachable, through a snowstorm that our best optics couldn't penetrate. A sniper, operating alone, with no spotter and no support. He turned back to Maya, his voice dropping to a near whisper filled with awe. 7 targets, over 900 meters, in a blinding blizzard. They called it the most extraordinary feat of marksmanship in modern warfare. We called it a miracle. They told us the assets file was sealed, designated only as E29V. They never told us she was a goddamn guardian angel." The general's words hung in the stunned silence. The entire training range had come to a standstill, every eye fixed on the unassuming woman in the gray t-shirt. It was Leo who finally broke the spell, his voice trembling. "Maya? What is he talking about?" Maya looked at her brother, a flicker of a long-buried past in her eyes. "He's talking about a job I once had," she said, her voice even and calm. She then addressed the general. "I was a tactical support asset, attached temporarily. Not an operator. My records were compartmentalized for a reason. A reason that kept you a ghost while the men you saved got medals," Thorne countered, his respect clear. "That was my choice," Maya stated simply. A young female recruit, older than the rest, stepped forward. "Ma'am, why did you leave? After something like that?" Maya's gaze softened. She looked at the young faces around her, soldiers on the same path she had once walked. "Because the mission was over," she said, choosing her words carefully. "And because taking a life, even to save another, carves something out of your soul. I did what was necessary to bring good men home. But I never wanted to be a weapon again. I wanted to remember who I was before I learned how to become one." The master sergeant, his face now a mask of deep humility and shame, approached her. "Ma'am. My conduct was unacceptable. I apologize." "You were protecting your men, Sergeant," Maya acknowledged with a nod. "Your instincts were right, your information was just incomplete." The recruit who had called her a suburban mom pushed his way to the front, his face beet red. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology. What I said, it was disrespectful and ignorant." Maya met his gaze directly. "You couldn't have known," she said, without an ounce of condescension. "But remember this feeling. The next time you're about to judge someone you don't understand, remember this. Let it make you curious instead of cruel." General Thorne watched her, a deep understanding passing between them. "We could have used you," he said quietly. "Your skills are one in a generation. The world has enough people skilled at taking lives, General," Maya replied. "I think it could use a few more skilled at living one." Her words were not a rebuke, but a statement of a hard-won peace. She had faced the abyss and chosen to walk away, a decision that required a different, more profound kind of strength. The revelation changed the atmosphere of the training ground completely. The air, once crackling with tension and arrogance, was now thick with respect. General Thorne gave a curt nod. "As you were. Let the qualification continue." But it did not continue as before. When it was Leo's turn to shoot again, Maya walked over, ignoring the now-defunct barrier. She knelt beside her brother, her presence a silent anchor. "Breathe, Leo," she whispered, her voice for him alone. "Feel the trigger, don't pull it. Let the rifle become part of you. You know how to do this." With her calm voice in his ear, Leo's hands steadied. His breathing evened out. He squeezed the trigger, and the heavy rifle bucked against his shoulder. A distant ping confirmed a perfect hit on the 800-meter target. He passed his qualification with the highest marks of the day. Later, as the sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, General Thorne personally took a marker and wrote a message on the main bulletin board in the barracks hall. It read, "When a quiet observer offers you a correction, listen. They might be the one who once guarded your back in a storm you never knew you were in." The legend of E-29V spread through the base like wildfire. The code began appearing on recruits' notebooks and rifle stocks, a clandestine symbol of quiet excellence. When it was time for Maya to leave, something extraordinary happened. As she walked toward the parking lot, the soldiers on the field, recruits, instructors, and support staff alike, stopped what they were doing. Without a single order being given, they formed two long, silent lines, creating a path for her. As Maya walked between them, each soldier, from the lowest private to the master sergeant, raised a hand in a slow, deliberate salute. It wasn't a salute of regulation, it was one of pure, unadulterated respect. Leo walked beside her, his head held high, his chest puffed with a pride so immense it threatened to crack his ribs. At the edge of the parking lot, the recruit who had apologized earlier approached her one last time. "Ma'am," he said, "I learned a lesson today I'll never forget." "What's that?" Maya asked, a small smile touching her lips. "That heroes don't wear capes," he said. "Sometimes, they just look like somebody's sister." 6 months later, Leo graduated at the top of his Delta Force selection class. During his valedictorian speech, he didn't mention his sister by name, but everyone who had been there that day knew exactly who he was talking about. "I learned that true strength isn't measured by the power you can wield," he said, his voice steady and clear. "It's measured by the wisdom to know when and how to use it. It's about doing what is necessary, no matter the personal cost, and then having the grace to walk away without needing applause." On the base, the story of the Ghost of Bragg became a foundational legend. Veteran instructors would tell new recruits about E-29V as a lesson in humility. It was a reminder that the most dangerous person on the field might not be the one making the most noise. They are the ones who watch, who listen, who know their worth without needing to prove it. Legends walk among us, and most of them prefer to stay in the shadows. They don't need parades or recognition because their validation isn't found in public praise. It's found in the quiet knowledge of the lives they saved, of the difference they made when everything was on the line. So the next time you see someone standing quietly on the sidelines, don't be so quick to dismiss them. You never know who you're looking at. They might not look like a hero, but sometimes, the most extraordinary people are the ones who have mastered the art of looking ordinary. If you believe that true heroes don't need to announce themselves, type, "I will live with respect," in the comments below. Let's create a community that values quiet strength and unseen courage. And as always, please comment with respect, because you never know the battles the person on the other side of the screen has fought. Thank you for watching, and please consider subscribing for more stories like this.